Hey Dave, the guys in level design decided that they want to make a water level. Now I know that you're very busy, but if you could just picture it for a moment. You know, just the two characters swimming underwater, monkeys in the ocean. I'm just trying to paint a picture for you. The gorillas swimming around. You know, Donkey Kong, he's the one with the tie on. He'd be just swimming around and just sort of underwater with the smaller one, with the red hat. Diddy Kong. I think that's his name.
The track that you're currently listening to is called Aquatic Ambience, and is, incredibly, being played back on a Super Nintendo sound chip. Composed by David Wise for 1994's Donkey Kong Country, it is one of, if not the most notable tracks from the game. Donkey Kong Country is a super tight 2D platform game about monkeys and apes who wear clothing and fight pirate crocodiles. So, it's a bit of a shock that it features one of the most transcendent pieces of music that I've ever heard. It is widely recognized as one of the greatest pieces of video game music ever composed, having been praised by artists like Trent Reznor and Donald Glover, the latter of which actually sampled it in his own song titled Eat Your Vegetables. And as far as I can tell, it's the only track from the series that has its own Wikipedia page. Hell, even I did my own version of the song for a project I worked on called Video Game Basement Band. How did a track from a Super Nintendo game achieve such renown? A track that's featured in a water level, no less. How did a song designed only to be played back on a Super Nintendo SSMP sound chip end up on the stages of music festivals, with its original composer playing the saxophone along with it? Let me paint a picture for you. It's December of 1999, and I am 4 years old. The only music that I had really heard at that point that I actually sort of enjoyed was from NSYNC, Sugar Ray, and Ace of Base for some reason. Don't kid yourself, fellas, that Don't Turn Around cover is a bop and you know it. But, on Christmas morning, I was given a small box with this banana yellow cartridge inside. And it was that banana yellow cartridge that would change the trajectory of my life forever. Donkey Kong 64 starts out deep in the jungle. It's warm. The sun is setting. It's tranquil. Silence that pervades every acre of wilderness, every palm tree, every waterfall, every cave. A perfect neutral space to get your bearings. But after the opening tutorial, you'll find yourself in a tunnel looking at this. The blinding light of the outside world, beckoning you forward. And then, few years later, my dad bought a piano and set it up in our living room, and I just couldn't help myself. My love of music, the reason that I play and compose music at all today, can be traced right back to this specific moment. This one simple tune changed everything for me. But the DK Isle music wasn't written to give me an epiphany. Its main function is to serve the setting that you're meant to experience it in, to help pull you into that world and give it meaning and legitimacy as a real place. Immersion, if you needed it in a single word. Really, that's the primary function of all video game music. Not the best segue, but it's the best one that I could. The role of music in a game is a pretty crucial one to the overall experience. If I can provide an example, have you ever tried roaming the wilds of Skyrim with the music turned off? The ambient sounds of the forest and tundra can be beautiful indeed. But once you turn that music back on, it becomes another object entirely. You now feel the entire weight of your solitude as you traverse the wilderness. The full scope of your adventure, now infinitely more apparent as you chart your course through the world. And the raw beauty of that world, now more palpable than ever. You can feel the chill of every gust of wind, the smell of pine trees in the air. It's easy to understand what's happening here. The score perfectly sets the tone and mood that Skyrim's developers intended for the player. It's not something easily verbalized, but you know it when you feel it, don't you? I am not the biggest metalhead myself. The loud, abrasive, distorted tones that demand they be heard, it's just really not for me. But when I hear Mick Gordon's Doom soundtrack, I am just itching to start ripping demons limb from limb. It activates some primal desire for violence deep within my brain, and now all the demons of hell have the great misfortune of being locked in a room with me. It's exhilarating. But there's a lot more here that we can do besides just setting the tone and feel of a scene. Association is a huge part of what makes video game music so effective. Shadow of the Colossus gives you great musical feedback when you finally find a boss's weak spot. The music acting as recognition of you performing the correct action, and simultaneously motivating you to continue fighting. Walking along this rampart in Dark Souls, seeing this guy jump down from the tower, and hearing this, and realizing, oh god, I'm about to die. Walking into a room in Left 4 Dead and hearing this, and realizing, oh god, I'm about to fucking die. One way or the other, video game music's purpose has always been to serve the game it exists within. For the most part, until recent years, it's largely stayed within those virtual walls. But now, it's clear to see that video game music has taken on much more of a life of its own. More and more people are listening to video game music outside of the actual video games themselves. It's something that I listen to in my car or at work. A few years ago, I went to see a full orchestra play the music of Final Fantasy, and a couple years after that, a separate one for Kingdom Hearts. It's evident, now more than ever, just how much of an influence video game music has on us as just music. That's all it's ever been, really. And looking back on my gaming career, it's really kind of astounding how much great music I was being exposed to without ever even realizing it. Games that I had almost completely forgotten about. But if I hear the music from those games again, immediately, I'm taken right back. Maybe this is not quite hitting you in the way I'm intending it to. Maybe this whole video game music being more than the sum of its parts thing is really just sorta trivial to you. But if you've seen any of my other videos, you know we've been down this road before. Maybe you're more like me than you think. Maybe there's something in there that I can get at. I'd like to try something really quick, if you don't mind. A little experiment, if you will. Whether or not you've played the games before, odds are you know this song. Playing it on my piano, dearly beloved, I hear those notes and immediately I'm there. I close my eyes and I'm 6 years old again, PS2 controller in my hand, experiencing Kingdom Hearts for the first time. Those are really special memories for me, as Kingdom Hearts is one of, if not my most favorite game series of all time. But for me, it's a bit deeper than that. As with a lot of the games I talk about, it's a lot more personal. When I was a child, and maybe even a bit today, I had this very intense fear of vomiting. Please stay with me, I promise there's a point coming. But couple that intense fear of vomiting with a very weak stomach that was extremely prone to intense nausea, you had a young boy that was pretty frequently, up until the late hours of the night, doubled over in pain and constantly on the verge of a panic attack. It happened so often that I guess I just kinda got used to it, or at least I expected it. But because of the frequency of that, I actually developed a pretty effective strategy to calm myself down. I would start by closing my eyes. I would imagine myself laying on the beach, the gentle waves rhythmically and calmly lapping the sand as the sun warmed my skin. I could see the deep blue sky and billowing clouds in the distance, wisps of white floating through an eternally sunny sky. I could hear the sound of the ocean and seagulls flying overhead, all while the tranquil notes of Dearly Beloved fill the air. The tender musical embrace of that song always made me feel so safe. It was able to easily soothe me when nothing else could, always there to reassure me that everything was going to be okay. That quiet beach in my head has, ever since, felt like home. Yoko Shimomura wrote that song in the year 2000, and I will never be able to thank her enough for giving me that kind of peace. It feels like a gift, and it's gotten me through a lot of really hard times. Oh my god. The music of Kingdom Hearts has been immeasurably important to me as an amateur composer and as someone who just loves music. So you can imagine the look on my face when scrolling through TikTok, I come across this.
So I am Abby the Oboist. I play the oboe, and I post covers of video game songs, mostly video game soundtracks, but I've done some anime soundtracks as well. I've been playing video games literally my entire life. One of my earliest memories is watching my dad play Final Fantasy X. I come from a family of gamers. All of us play a shit ton of video games. And I've been surrounded by so many video games that have such beautiful soundtracks, again, from such a young age. If you have not listened to the Final Fantasy X soundtrack, this is just so beautiful, and it just makes my soul so happy. I watched my oldest sister play Kingdom Hearts 2, and I was just such a Final Fantasy fiend at a very young age that I was not interested in Kingdom Hearts because I was like, too much Disney, not enough Final Fantasy. So that's where I was coming from with
That's
Kingdom
kind of
Hearts.
where I still come from now.
I started playing the clarinet actually when I was 8, and then my oldest sister, when she was, I think, a junior in high school, which is around 16 in the US, she started playing the oboe in her high school band. And my little kid brain was like, if I switch to the oboe, I could maybe be better. I switched to the oboe and I was like starting to like hear it in songs and stuff. I was like, oh my god, that's the oboe in there, in that track. Especially when I was younger and I would learn new pieces in band, I would be like, oh, this sounds like this video game. I was a true geek to like the core with that, but I am a classically trained oboist. I started taking oboe lessons when I switched to oboe at 12 years old and continued oboe lessons until I graduated college in 2020. So I am pretty well versed in the classical sphere. That is the meat and potatoes of my background. In music school, it is like shoved into your brain 24/7 that classical music is the only way you can do music with your instrument, unless you play the saxophone, which it's jazz, unless you're joining a military band. But if you play the oboe, the violin, clarinet, it's like you are told you are going to be learning orchestral excerpts. Your dream role is either going to be teaching other people how to play your instrument, or you are going to play in a major orchestra. I remember sitting in on a conversation at one point in college where it was a lot of like working professionals in the music world, and it was myself as like a college student, and there was a professional, I think she was a cellist, complaining about how they play all these amazing works, but what sold out their concert the fastest and actually fully sold out the auditorium was like a Halo concert. And she was complaining about it being like, we learn all of these like crazy pieces and all these world-renowned musicians are playing the hardest pieces ever composed, and people just want to come here and listen to us play Halo, like the Halo soundtrack. And in my head, I was like, that's because that's what people are wanting to pay to listen to, and that doesn't mean it's better or worse or anything on, again, Beethoven, for example, but that's what people want to hear.
Would you believe me if I told you that all of this music was written by real people? I know, it's kind of a wild concept. And a lot of those people that I would call my favorites are ones that you've already heard from today. Grant Kirkhope with Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64, Yoko Shimomura with Kingdom Hearts and Super Mario RPG, and David Wise with Donkey Kong Country. But that's barely even a start. There are so many others you should check out. Lena Raine's work on Celeste and Chicory is an amazing achievement for indie games. Harry Gregson Williams' scores for the Metal Gear Solid series are great, especially the fourth entry, with music that so effortlessly blends pulse-pounding action and gut-wrenching sadness. Andrew Pralow's simple yet effective music written for Outer Wilds beautifully blurs the lines between existential dread, hope, and fleeting beauty. The Undertale soundtrack by Toby Fox is so bafflingly wonderful, so surprising that it's difficult to imagine how one person produced so many tracks at this level of quality. The soundtrack for Halo, written by Marty O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore, is iconic. But we really only need to mention one of those guys, we can kind of just forget the other one. This video would be hours long if I gave myself the time to fully appreciate all of these artists. And honestly, the links are in the description, just go appreciate them for yourself. But there is one last composer I'd like to talk about for just a moment. Me. In 2016, a coworker came up to me and said, "Hey, a few friends and I wanted to make a video game. Would you be interested in doing some music for it?" They knew that I was a reasonably talented pianist and thought maybe I could write music as well. I told them, of course, I'd be thrilled to write music for their game. I'd written plenty of music before, and I was well acquainted with digital audio workstations like FL Studio. Only problem was, that wasn't entirely true. Sorry, Alex. I had only ever written one song, and I had forgotten what it sounded like. I also had never used a digital audio workstation before. I just straight up lied about that one. So that night, I downloaded a trial version of FL Studio, watched a few YouTube tutorials, and somewhere around 4 AM, I finished this. My first ever piece of music for a video game. A bit simple, but you know. Over a few more years, I honed my skills. I got better. I got a lot better. And that first little demo eventually turned into this. But that end product didn't come from repetitious refinement of the same ideas. It came from constant experimentation and a lot of failures. Jesus Christ, this is so bad. Doing this sort of thing is a lot more difficult than it sounds. It takes real talent, dedication, and a lot of patience. A lot of the compositional giants of video game music that I mentioned earlier have been doing this for a very long time and are doing amazing things both digitally and with live instruments. But there's one more person I want to talk about, and I promise this time it's not me. One more person that I want to mention that since I've discovered them, has grown so much and is continuing every day to make music that just absolutely floors me.
I am John Robert Matz, composer for video games, mostly. Occasionally film, television, stuff like that as well, too. I think that video game music is, it's a different kind of discipline. I feel like it definitely can encompass all of the other skill sets that you need for writing music for any other medium. Like you can, when you're writing music for film, you are scoring to picture usually, like the film is locked, ideally, and so you're writing to match what's happening on screen. But when you're writing music for games, sure, you can have cinematics or cutscenes that you're scoring, which are exactly like a film, but you can also have tons of stuff that is varying degrees of, reactive, interactive. The player is making the choices. I've always described writing music for games, writing interactive music for games, as like scoring music for a play with the least cooperative actors in existence. The very sophisticated interactive music system I'm use in LucasArts adventure games and in their simulators, X-Wing and TIE Fighter and stuff like that, like they were stitching together, and I remember being aware of this when I was like 12 playing these things, just like that they were stitching together music that was reacting exactly to what I was doing on the fly, and that was incredibly fascinating and compelling. It was like having done musical theater and seen how like my father conducted musical theater stuff in the pit, and like sat in on rehearsals and watched how they would repeat bits, vamp for a while, and then segue to a new section when the actors were in their places or where the scene change had been done, and seeing that sort of thing happen in a game was incredibly fascinating. It really wasn't until I played a game, I think it came out in 1999, called Outcast, which had a score by Lenny Moore, that featured the Moscow Symphony Orchestra and Chorus, which blew my mind because I'd never played a game that had a fully, recorded live by a real symphony, orchestral score like that before. And the soundtrack is fantastic. Highly recommend you check it out. Seeing that and seeing that there were composers writing music for live people that sounded like this, that sounded like the best film scores I'd heard, made me realize, this could be a thing that you could do if you wanted to as a career. You look at like an old game and you turn off the sound, it's lacking so much. When you turn it on, what you're hearing mostly is a little bit of a noise channel for sound effects and then cool music. And the music drives so nicely all of the rest of the experience. Like with something that's more grounded like Chia, even though it's still a little bit impressionistic in its art style, etc., we want it to feel like it's very much like, where are we right now? What is this going to feel like? What is the emotional state we want to be in? It's one of the reasons that having music being written alongside the game as it's being developed is very, very helpful. Like as a composer, being able to see these things come together so I know what this place is supposed to feel like, and then to try to conjure that emotion with the music. It is very intentional, what we're trying to do. All the music is basically, I'm doing my best to try to fit whatever the vibe of the location is and the emotional state that I want the player to be in at that time, which is really the state that I want to imagine that our protagonist is in at that time. How are they feeling? How should they feel when they arrive in this town or when they reach the top of this mountain as they look across this vista? What's that going to feel like? the great crime is, of course, like, and I was definitely a perpetrator of this crime, because when I was a kid listening to the sound of MIDI playback, I was like, that's cool, that's music, but it's not real music. It's being made by a computer. And having to make that like connection of like, oh, no. Just because somebody sat down and programmed this doesn't mean it took any less, intellectual artistry to create this than a person who sat down at a piano in a recording studio and recorded something. You can do whatever you want. Play the Celeste soundtrack and jam out to Lena Raine's stuff. Like that's totally fine. It's great. You can listen to that just as easily as anything else. It's a matter of like what you want to. But I think that there's definitely something to be said for video game music being more mainstream nowadays. If I go back like through my discography, it's like Artemis, very first score I did, I think had like one track with solo trumpet that I recorded on it. The second game I ever worked on was Gunpoint, and the only bit of music that actually made it into the game was we had live trumpet, and that was it. But then if I go to the next one, that's Rodina. And that, I think, was like me learning to dabble with synths and to do a much better job of mixing and working with a few live instruments here and there, and also like way better samples, and then you look at Chia, and that is not only am I trying to do a bunch of live stuff, learn instruments I've never learned before, but also the entire score is based on the music of a culture that I'm not part of. So I spent 6 months or more just deep diving into French musicological journals, writings about the different types of music the native people of New Caledonia have created that has been recorded, the folk music, the traditional music, and trying to come up with sounds that felt like that and didn't feel like like Moana or something like that. We wanted something that was very grounded in what music of New Caledonia sounded like, and then bringing that to this cinematic sort of state. Every single project is built on the last one, but who knows what the next project's going to be for me. It might be something bigger or smaller, but I'll always try to figure out some way that I can do it better than before and to learn new techniques and stress stuff. I don't like just doing that stuff for I guess I'm a chronically lazy person in this regard. I don't like just doing things better for fun. I need to have an excuse. So when I have a project that I'm like, I can try this new thing out on, I will try this new thing out. And that's what I'm always looking for.
There are more people than just me who have something of an obsession with video game music, and a lot of them have taken that obsession and really run with it. Video game cover bands like the One-Ups, Super Guitar Bros, and The World is Square. Solo artists like Smooth McGroove, Freddie Greddy, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Acapella VGM, and Family Jewels. One of my personal favorites is a man who really wasn't even familiar with video games, yet was able to give us some of the most exciting renditions of their music.
So that's what all that Joplin thing was about. You really wanted me to play the Maple Leaf.
Well, no, there was...
This is Tom Brier. Tom Brier is a ragtime and jazz pianist who's been writing and playing music since the late 70s, early 80s. He is so good at what he does that he's easily seen as one of the few modern ragtime pianists that wasn't just keeping the genre alive, but actively evolving it. Releasing multiple albums to critical acclaim and easily cementing himself as one of the best modern pianists to ever do it. Eventually, he made his way to YouTube in 2007, and his channel is still up today. And if you search for his most popular videos, almost all of them are from video games. I was first introduced to Tom Brier when I discovered this video of him sight-reading Peanut Park from Super Mario Sunshine. Tom has not heard this song before. He's not read the sheet music before. He's just reading the music for the first time and playing along with it effortlessly. As you watch him move his hands and fingers almost mechanically, you can just see it on his face and feel it in his movements. He's having so much fun. After watching him dominate this song, I had to hear more, and I found a video of him sight-reading Snakey Shanty from Donkey Kong Country 2. The beginning starts out slow and methodical, almost as if he's studying the entire sheet in mere seconds. And once he arrives at this little crescendo where the song truly begins, he absolutely shreds it. It's just astonishing. Coming from a person who wasn't a huge fan of video games at the time, these piano renditions end up being one of the most stunning celebrations of video game music that we have on this website. In 2016, Tom Brier was in a car accident that left him paralyzed from the neck down. So, unfortunately, today he's not really playing music. But there are other pianists that are still holding the same torch. Jordan D. Piano, the video game pianist, and Brent Black, just to name a few. But let's take a closer look at that last fella. This is Brent Black, better known by his YouTube alias Brentalfloss, playing music from Super Mario Land. It is really impressive stuff, mesmerizing to watch. But the more you listen, you can kind of feel something in there, right? You feel it too. The more you listen, you can almost hear some lyrics that are hidden in there. It's just so perfectly suited for it. Don't believe me? Let's give it a try. Clean, black and green, hold it in your hand, this Mario Land. In 1989, this came down the pipeline.
Yeah, Mario's back, out to save that crazy Princess Daisy. By now he's sick of this princess fake out bullshit. We creepy sprite.
I think that it's instructive to know that some of the first songs I learned to play on the piano when I was teaching myself and still playing with two fingers were songs like Zelda, Dragon Warrior, Mario. Yes, of course, for my life, which includes, songwriting, just sort of music and lyrics about whatever, and writing musical theater at a pretty early age. And then video games over here, yeah, they are separate, but also all along in my journey. And I should say at this point, the thing that people don't always think of me as, that actually I think is my secret, superpower, is arrangement and orchestration. From a very early age, I had a 4-track MIDI keyboard that I could do piano and bass and drums and something else. And I could make a little song. And then I realized I could make an arrangement of a video game tune. Video games became more and more of a hobby, less and less of a daily thing. I would occasionally go back and play Deus Ex. I would occasionally go back and play the first Final Fantasy, emulating on my computer. Video game music was part of my foundational education and experience in music, part and parcel to my whole journey with it, but wasn't what I was focusing on. And then I happened to do a little song about Mega Man on YouTube, and it kind of took off.
Mega Man, I'm blue and cyan.
With songwriting, there are a million ways in. Another way to look at it is a song is a crossword puzzle, and all you need is the first word filled out, and you can use that one to figure out the next one. It doesn't really matter what word you start with. So there's no process that is the same each time. You just have to find that key into the box. You just have to have that first part of the crossword, and if you want it bad enough, you can get the next one and the next one, and that informs that, and suddenly you're branching out and you've got a song. Sometimes, like, I did a song about the Me Maker channel, where you make a little me of yourself on the Wii, and I was with a cute woman and was trying to make her laugh, so I started singing like "Make a me with me," and then thought, oh, that's a video.
Make a me with me. It will be so much fun to hear. Just turn on your Wii, and we'll make 1 or 2 or 3. Make a me.
I did a song called Zidane de Vivi that uses a little bit of the music of the theme of Vivi, the young wizard in Final Fantasy IX, but extrapolates it into a song that's about his story, and in doing that, it's really about like life and stuff. There's a book called Story by Robert McKee, and while I'm not much of a screenwriter, one thing I took from that book is him saying if you try to write a movie about everything or to make everyone happy, it will somehow connect with no one and make no one happy. If you write a movie about one thing, even if nobody's experienced that one thing, they will somehow be able to find themselves in it, because if you say something universal about the human condition, we've experienced all of the building blocks of things you can experience by a very early age. And in the same way, if my way into Breath of the Wild is trying to impress a great fairy who I want to date, I can still make a song about the universal experience of Breath of the Wild, but I had to have a way in, and that happened to be it.
Please, please, please link up with me, baby. Take a breath and let's get wild. Let me see that 5-foot smile. Come on, be my magic lady. Say the magic words I know, like mega, like a hiney ho.
I didn't set out to be an ambassador of the spirit and beauty of video game music, but once you've been doing something for enough years and people ask you questions about it, and you realize you have to be able to articulate your feelings and your thoughts about it, you become who I am now, which is someone who will defend it as a very legitimate and important genre. And I'm always happy to educate people about why. And just to put a bow on it, something I think is really special about video game music is also something that's special about musical theater. It is not a style. It is barely a genre. It is just a library. And you can add to it, and you can rifle through it. There's bluegrass in video game music. There's gospel. There's waltzes. There's all kinds of stuff. And Koji Kondo probably did between Koji Kondo and Nobuo Uematsu, they probably did all of the styles we could name in their day, since they've been working on it. So it's a library of music. And if you've been there and spent a lot of time there, you have a kinship with others. And it's one of the rare genres of music that's like that, where if you heard it without the beeps and boops, you wouldn't necessarily know what it was from. But if you do, you have a kinship with those who know where it's from, despite the varying styles.
So, what does this all leave us with? Just that video game music is really good? Sure, that's something that you can and should take away from all this. But I want you to try something. Think about your favorite song, one of your favorite songs. Got it playing in your head? Great. Now, think about where you were the first time you heard it. What were you doing that day? How old were you? What was the weather like? A lot of these memories just kinda come flooding back on their own, don't they? Now think about your favorite video game. Think about how it feels to play. Think about the characters. Think about the world. You can hear the music as well, can't you? Those places and moments in time are inextricably tied to that music. It's an indelible part of the whole experience. And when those places and moments in time are ones that you're experiencing over and over again on subsequent playthroughs, it's hard not to feel like that music, not unlike the rest of the game, has become a small part of who you are.
I think video game music came into its own right around the late Atari, early NES. It turned a corner. I think something like the Super Mario Brothers soundtrack was, I can't say that was like the turning point, but moments like that where you realize, oh, we've now got a polyphony of 3 plus percussion. We've got a little band, but a little band, you know, only 3 notes at a time. And it's the entire soundscape of the game. There's no atmospheric wind and rain and whatever. It's just that. So there has to be a 45 to 90 second loop of music you can listen to for 30 hours of your life and not get tired of and not want to mute. The music had to be good. That's the roots of video game music as people remember it. Now add to that millions of children are all listening to this at the same time. And now you have something that's akin to musical theater music in the following way. If you were in a musical in high school and I, on the other side of the country, was also in that musical 10 years earlier, 10 years later, 30 years earlier, this can happen. These days, 100. We were still in the same show. We still heard that music over and over and over and over and over again and lived it. We actively moved through it and had our own special journey in it, but it was the same show.
I think legitimately some of the best music in the world is being written by video game composers today. Like, they are, you know, one of the things I may have touched on before, video game scores are frequently allowed to be so much more unfettered than film scores. Like, you can really get away with doing all kinds of stuff, which means you can experiment, you can do strange things, and you get some really impressive work as a result. And I want to keep seeing that happen. I don't know. It's neat. All music is designed to manipulate emotion, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, you either want to express an emotional state, like as a composer, as a songwriter, as a singer, you're trying to express yourself, and therefore to gain the empathy of the audience, to put them in a similar mindset of yourself, to share your feelings. Or you're trying to, with a score, to put people in a mindset that is appropriate for the game. Put people in the same emotional state the game requires them to be in. Now, if you take the game away and you just provide the music that puts you in the emotional state, guess what happens? Now it's pulse-pounding, exciting adventure while you're washing dishes. Which is okay, actually, because now your dishes are exciting.
Again, I get a lot of people in my comment section being like, I've never heard someone play music like this on the oboe. Or so many people who are like, what is this instrument? I've never seen it before. It's something that, like, it draws in people to a world that they have never heard of or have never heard of in a context that they're familiar with. And that is something that I love. I've listened to video game music for so long that it's like, I still really associate a lot of tracks with the game. But I will say that watching like the opening scene of Final Fantasy X and Tazanarkin is playing, that will always make me emotional. I love these soundtracks, and I also know that if I truly wanted to, I could work my musical chops back up to play very hard solo pieces that, like, I used to play in college, but that's just not fulfilling for me.
The battles you fight in, the mountains you climb, all the evils you defeat and tetraminos that you stack, these aren't things that are only happening within the context of their digital spaces. They're things that are happening to you. The music of Undertale doesn't affect you on an emotional level just because it's very well composed. It's because you know these people. Super Mario Bros. 2's ending music isn't just calming and peaceful on its own, it's mirroring your own sighs of relief. Finally lowering your shoulders after surviving one of the hardest Mario games out there. Your heart races as the Halo theme barrels down the road with your Warthog, because you were there. You were the one who destroyed the Halo ring and saved the galaxy. Really, we all were. These are experiences that we were all lucky enough to have. It's something that's communal. We can all identify with each other because of the shared experiences we've had through these games, and the music that accompanied us, further tying us to those experiences. Though we're all separated by distance and by time, we're still all part of the same show. And all the while, it's doing something else entirely, something equally as affecting. This music acts as a window to our past, to remember who we once were before we became who we are now. Music, especially from our favorite games, is a really effective vehicle for our nostalgia. When talking about this idea, I always come back to one person in particular. Keiichi Suzuki, the composer for the Mother series. I apologize if I get a little emotional about this, but it's the most apt way that I can demonstrate the meaning of this to you. In the documentary Mother to Earth, Suzuki sits down to listen to some of his original demos for Mother 1. Demos that he likely hasn't heard in decades. And the look on his face when he hears himself play 8 melodies for the first time is just, well, just see it for yourself. You can see in his eyes all the memories he's reliving, all the emotions stored deep within his brain, buried for decades, and now triumphantly returning to the surface after all this time, like a warm embrace from an old friend. It's the feeling I get when I listen back to the first song I ever wrote. The original song that made me want to write music in the first place. It's Abby the Oboist hearing To Xanarkand or A Fleeting Dream for the first time, and letting those emotions shine through in her covers, introducing fans of video game soundtracks to a world of music that they might not be familiar with. It's John Robert Matz's journey from a small indie composer on Rodina to seasoned excellence on Chia. It's Brentalfloss emerging from the world of musical theater to give us one of my favorite celebrations of video game music that we have on the internet. It's our shared experience, our love, our passion. It's our nostalgia and emotional connection to a hobby we all love so much, amplified into infinity by some truly incredible music. It's this.
I knew I'd fucking do it, man. I had this friend once back in the senior year of high school, and you know, him and I didn't really know him that well. But we'd come home after just practicing sports and stuff, and this guy would always talk to me about Kingdom Hearts. He passed away. He got hit by a hit and run. And he never got to play this game. And it's here now, man, and I'm just like... And I went through a whole life experience for this, man, and there'd be times where I'm angry and I just listen to this song, or different moments. And I've been crying a lot today just thinking about this moment, and then it just happened, and like, man... It just means so much.
It's not just music. It's not just a game. To me, it has and always will be an undeniable and beautiful part of who we are as people who love video games.